Putin wants to create Chernobyl 2.0 in Ukraine because he realizes that he cannot win the war on the battlefield, so he's trying every little dirty trick he has up his sleeve. Now, of course, he cannot use a nuclear bomb because he's forbidden to do so from his boss in China. But what he can do is cause a quote-unquote accident which will lead to a nuclear disaster. And that's exactly what he's doing. The largest nuclear plant in Europe, Zaporizhzhia nuclear plant, has been occupied by Russia since 2022. Well, guess what? 5 days ago, the facility was cut off from external power source, and ever since then, it's been running on backup generators. This is an extremely risky situation because the nuclear material could leak out into the atmosphere. Don't believe me? Hear it from a nuclear scientist.
We can potentially get into a situation where we run out of diesel. And this can lead to an incident with damage to the active zone of the reactor. That would release radioactive material into the environment. It would have consequences not only for Ukraine. It would surely have consequences beyond the country's borders. It's something we must avoid.
Now first, let's go over exactly what's happening, and then we'll talk about why Russia is doing this. Many experts are warning that this could turn into a Fukushima-like crisis that happened in Japan back in 2011. You see, in the March of that year, Japan was struck by one of the strongest earthquakes in human history, 9.0 on the Richter scale. This led to a massive tsunami. The waves that hit Japan reached as high as 14 meters or 46 feet. Now, the Japanese nuclear plants were prepared for this, so they shut off the reactors safely. But even in this stage, the cooling system was very important because the nuclear fuel had to be kept cooled. To power that cooling system, they were using backup generators. But the tsunami flooded that room and the cooling system shut down. This led to radioactive material leaking into air and the ocean. Because of this, 150,000 people had to be evacuated from the area around the reactor. The accident became the worst nuclear disaster since Chernobyl. And to this day, parts of the regions remain restricted because of what happened. Because of this situation, the world was forced to rethink nuclear safety once again. Luckily, because of the Fukushima crisis, European regulators actually stress-tested the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant, and they learned that the plant could withstand a loss of external power for 72 hours. That's 3 whole days. But the current loss of power has been going on for 5 days already, and we don't know how long Putin will take before the power is restored. In fact, President Zelensky warned about this situation when the blackout started. At that point, he was still in New York at the UN summit giving the speech, and he gave this warning.
Last year, at this assembly, I warned the world about the risk of radiation disasters, especially due to Russia's occupations of our Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant, the biggest in Europe, but nothing's changed. Nothing's. And yesterday, the plant went into blackout again, and Russia hasn't stopped shelling.
Now, as you guys may already know, nuclear plants are not built to operate under war zones. But luckily, ever since Chernobyl, we have taken nuclear safety very, very seriously. That means the structure where the nuclear fuel is stored is really, really strong. Strong as in it can withstand a missile strike. Pretty likely, because we have tested running a train into the structure and many different things, and it's strong enough to survive all that. But the one thing that it cannot withstand is loss of the cooling system. That's exactly why the water and electricity are paramount to make sure the nuclear power plant, even when not in use, does not turn into a nuclear crisis. And I know some people are going to take this argument and turn it into an extreme version where they would argue that this is nothing like Putin using a nuclear bomb. I'm not a bomb expert, But
I'm obviously not a fucking bomb expert, but I talked to one.
You should see erect.
like I said, I'm not a bomb expert, but we have seen a story like this play out in Japan already. 150,000 people had to be evacuated. Clearly, we do not want that in Europe. I'm sure Putin does not want that right on the Russian border. So the obvious question is, why is Russia doing this? Well, the Russian reasoning is pretty simple. They want to take over the plant, and that means they need to connect it to the Russian grid instead of the Ukrainian grid. You see, the Zaporizhia nuclear plant was connected to the Ukrainian power grid all this time. But then Russians started shelling the power connection after they took over the plant, and over the last few months, they have completely disconnected it from the Ukrainian grid. And now Putin wants to build a power line all the way through occupied Ukrainian territory and connect the nuclear power plant to their Russian grid and hopefully restart the plant.
Russia appears to be moving forward with its plan to restart the Zaporizhia nuclear power plant, which it seized from Ukraine in 2022. Now, according to reports, Russia is building nearly 80 kilometers of new power lines connecting the occupied port city of Berdyansk to Mariupol and eventually to the Zaporizhia plant in Ukraine's southeast. Experts say it is a calculated push to bring the plant back online and under full Russian control. All 6 reactors at the site were gradually shut down after months of intense fighting, and concerns have remained high over the safety of the facility. The head of Russia's state nuclear agency, Rosatom, recently confirmed that replacing the damaged power grid is one of several key steps needed to resume operations.
In short, Russia is trying to steal the plant just like they have stolen Ukrainian land. Now, Ukraine could likely get the plant back because it's right on the front lines. But during the battle, we don't know what's going to happen to the plant. And there's a good chance that if Russians look like they're about to lose the plant, they will just destroy it to cause problems in Ukraine and then try to blame that crisis on Ukrainians. That's why Ukraine has publicly said that they will never attack the plant, they won't even shell around the plant because they don't want to take that kind of risk. So now Russia is taking advantage of Ukraine's cautiousness and basically stealing the plant. All the while, the Russian ministers are doing what they have always done, lie to the world. We have clips of Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov giving a speech at the UN and basically confirming to NATO that, hey, we have no intentions of attacking NATO. Those drones in Poland, they were not a big deal. Listen to it yourself.
Moreover, threats of the use of force against Russia are increasingly being made. Russia is being accused of almost planning to attack the North Atlantic Alliance and the European Union countries. President Putin has repeatedly debunked these provocations. Russia has never had and does not have any such intentions. However, any aggression against my country will be met with a decisive response.
Now I want to show you guys something that happened back in 2022. In fact, this happened on February 10th, 2022, 14 days before Putin announced his special military operation and the Russian tanks came rolling into Ukraine. If you guys remember, the world was already worried about the Russian invasion way before it started. That's because Russia had amassed hundreds of thousands of troops and bunch of military equipment right on the Ukrainian border. The Russian excuse was that this is just a military exercise. The Russian troops and the Belarusian troops are just practicing. They have no intentions of invading any other country. In fact, this was something Sergei Lavrov himself said publicly at a press conference 14 days before the invasion actually began. Listen to this yourself.
You said that there are exercises in Belarus too, and Mrs. Minister, Liz Truss, said that the main thing is to avoid war in Ukraine, and that's why I'm here. I foresee the denouement of this whole drama that the West is playing out, even trying to make a tragedy out of it, although everything looks more like a comedy. Sometime later, Western countries will learn that the Russian-Belarusian exercises are over, and Russian troops have returned to Russian territory. A big fuss will be made then to prove that the West has achieved de-escalation from Russia. Although in reality it will be trading air. Everyone knows perfectly well, and it has been stated that after the exercises are over, Russian troops always return to their territory.
российские войска всегда возвращаются на свою территорию.
Now, the same foreign minister is telling everyone at UN that people are freaking out for no reason. Russia has no intentions of invading any country. The jets, the drones in Estonia, in Poland, and Romania are all just fake news. On top of this, Sergei Lavrov also publicly said that it wasn't Russia that invaded Ukraine. It was Ukrainians who launched this war against Russians. Listen to it.
Ну и что касается...
And to answer your question, are we planning to attack any other countries? We are not planning to invade other countries. We didn't even attack Ukraine.
Украину не нападали.
At the end of the day, one thing is clear to everyone except Russians. Russia started this war, and it's Russia that's continuing it to this day. US has been pushing both Russians and Ukrainians to come to the negotiating table, agree to a ceasefire, and then negotiate a final peace agreement. Ukraine has agreed to all this unconditionally, and Russia still does not want to come to the negotiating table. Now, that's not me saying it. I'm very pro-Ukraine, as you guys can see from the videos on this channel. That's coming from US Vice President J.D. Vance. Now, let's just be frank. And now, even he's publicly admitting that it's Russia who doesn't want peace. Ukraine has been trying to achieve peace all this time, and Russia just keeps pushing it back. This was the statement he made just a few hours ago.
You ask what's changed. I think what's changed is the reality on the ground where the Russians are killing a lot of people, they're losing a lot of people, they don't have much to show for it. We remain committed to peace, but it takes two to tango. And unfortunately, what we've seen over the last couple of weeks, the Russians have refused to sit down with any bilateral meetings with the Ukrainians. They've refused to sit down with any trilateral meetings where the president or some other member of the administration could sit down with the Russians and the Ukrainians. So our view is we want peace here. We've been actively pursuing peace from the very beginning of the administration, but the Russians have got to wake up and accept reality here. A lot of people are dying. They don't have a lot to show for it. How many more people are they willing to lose? How many more people are they willing to kill for very little, if any, gain in the military advantage on the ground there? I think the answer is hopefully not that much, but certainly our attitude here is we're going to keep on working for peace, and we hope the Russians actually wake up to the reality on the ground.